1.9, distance, midpoint, and circle formulas. Not a whole lot in this section that's new. I'm going to remind you about some stuff, though, that you haven't seen in a while. The distance formula first. With the distance formula, what they do is they give us two coordinates, and we're supposed to find the distance between them. So that's real easy if they're lay on a horizontal line or a vertical line. But sometimes I get a point like this one, which is -2, -2. And then this point, which is 5, +2. Okay? So there's my 2 points, and I need to know the distance between them. Since I'm, kind of dyslexic, I don't use the distance formula. It's going to tell you that. The distance formula is that the distance is equal to the square root, and then it's the difference between the y values squared plus the difference between the x values squared. So that's the formula. And if you're a formula person, then you can very easily call one x1, y1, and the other one x2, y2, plug it into the formula, get the numbers. I don't do it that way. Normally I stop and think about what's going on here. If you look, the difference between the y values gives you the the vertical change, right? So I've gone from -2 to +2, which is 4 units, right? Went up 2 to get to 0 and past 2. And then my x2 minus x1 gives me the change in the x value. So I've gone from -2 to +5, so that's a change of 7 units. Everybody understand what I just did? Because it's a vertical or a horizontal line, you can just count those units, right? And then that's just the Pythagorean theorem. Because I know if I've gone horizontally and then vertically, I have got a 90-degree angle in there, right? So a squared plus b squared is equal to c squared, and to find c, I need the square root of that. So that's 4 squared plus 7 squared. But does everybody see that I did just do y's minus y's? Because if I did 2 minus -2, I'd get 4. Hey, you blowing me up? Okay. All right. So anyway, that's the distance formula. Look at the next section on the midpoint formula. You shouldn't need any explanation from me on the midpoint formula. Hang on just a second. Let me... Like I said, distance formula uses subtraction. The midpoint formula uses addition. Midpoint formula is just the average. So I have x1 plus x2 divided by 2, and y1 plus y2 divided by 2. Okay. So you just take the x coordinates and separate it from the y coordinates, add them up, divide by 2. The ones that seem to bother people a lot are the ones where they give you the midpoint and you have to work backwards to find out what the end point would be. Thank you. Okay. No, I just gave it to him today.
Oh, okay. Just like the one I took out there to him?
Oh, never mind. I sent him a new one.
So he's been out there, but I don't understand why it's all so risky.
It's fine.
Okay.
Down in the computer lab. All right. So if I have a segment and I have one endpoint is the point 4, 5. And the midpoint is -2, 3. And they want me to find the other endpoint. Anybody got any ideas on how we'd start out working that? So x1 plus x2 divided by 2 is going to give me the midpoint, the coordinate, the x-coordinate of the midpoint, right? Didn't we just get through saying that? So what are we going to do? Put 4 in for one of the x's, right? Leave the other endpoint there because I don't know it, and put in the coordinate, the x-coordinate of the midpoint that's been given to me. Now, can you do this problem? Because you just multiply by 2, so you get 4 plus x sub 2 is equal to negative 4, because I'm going to multiply both sides by 2. And then I subtract 4 from both sides, so the other endpoint's x-coordinate is negative 8. And then what do you have to do? Same process with the y-coordinate. So y1 plus y2 over 2 is equal to the y-coordinate of the midpoint. I do need to move my screen so I can put those in. So that's 5. 5 plus y2 divided by 2 is equal to 3. Same thing again, multiply both sides by 2. So 5 plus y, not y squared, but y sub 2 is equal to 6. So subtracting 5 from both sides. The y-coordinate of the midpoint is 1. So my other endpoint is the point negative 8, positive 1. Okay? So not hard. You just got to kind of think backwards when you do those. That's all there is on distance and on midpoint. Okay? You need the length of some segment, and you know the coordinates of the endpoint, you can find their distance. Whether you do it with a formula or you build your Pythagorean theorem. Okay? All right, the last thing that's in this section is talking about a circle. Okay? The standard form for the equation of a circle is x minus h squared plus y minus k squared equals r squared, where h and k are the center of the circle and r is the radius. A lot of times we call this the graph translation form in other books and in other places, because if I have the equation of the circle and it looks like this, I can draw the graph very quickly and easily. Example 3. And so what it might say to do is to graph the equation x minus 2 squared y plus 3 squared is equal to 16. Okay. So what's my center? It's 2, negative 3. Because in the formula it says x minus that number. That minus symbol is part of the formula, and you need to take the number following it. Since there's no minus here, this would have to be turned into y minus negative 3. That's how the negative 3 comes out. And so then the radius is equal to square root of 16, which is 4. So you just go to the graph, go over 2 and down 3. There's my center. And from there I'm going to go out 4 units in every direction that's either horizontal or vertical. And then you connect the dots, and if you've drawn your hash marks correctly, it makes a nice circle. Don't make diamonds on your paper that you're going to turn into me. I'm just going to tell you right now, I'm going to count them wrong. Yeah, well, curve it. We are very popular today. What is the deal? Thank you. All right. Any questions about how to use this to graph? The only other one there that's kind of tricky that sometimes people have a problem with is this one. It says x squared plus y minus 2 squared equals 4. Okay, so we have a problem with this one sometimes. We're supposed to graph this. What do we have to do? Find the center and the radius. And if I know those two things, I can draw this, right? What is the center? Zero, 2. That's exactly right. If I don't have anything subtracted from x, then it's 0, right? And the radius is 2. Okay, so I'm going to go to this point 0, 2. And then I'm going to go up 2, down 2, left 2, and right 2. And then we're going to draw it in using nice smooth curves. Okay? Any questions about how to use the standard form of the equation of a circle to draw its graph? Now, you do not always get the equation of the circle in standard form. Just doesn't happen, unfortunately. Sometimes we get the equation in what we call the general form. The general form is x squared plus y squared plus some number times x plus some number times y plus a number equals 0. Okay? This is what we call general form. Now let's talk about the example that we had a minute ago. Let's see, what was that? X minus 2, y plus 3. Okay. I don't remember what example we're on. Example 5? 4 or 5. All right. So this is in standard form. Let's talk about what it would take to go from this standard form into the general form. If I wanted this in general form, what would I have to definitely do? Get rid of the parentheses, right? I can't have any parentheses. It obviously doesn't have any parentheses in this thing. So what would I need to do? That dealie called full, or my version of full, where I do it in my head. The first one squared minus the first times the second times 2, which is 4x, plus 4. If you don't know how to do that, do x minus 2 times x minus 2, because that's what x minus 2 squared means, right? And so that'd be minus 4x, and that'd be plus 4. Okay, that's all I did. And now same thing here, so I get y squared plus 6y plus 9, because I did the first one and squared it, first times the second times 2, and the last one squared. And that's equal to 16. Okay, now I want to get it in this form up here, so I need to take the x squared plus the y squared. They need to come first. Then the minus 4x. Then the plus 6y, the x and the y. Then I need to take all of the numbers. So I've got a positive 4 and a positive 9, so I get positive 13 equals 6. Now, is this in the right form? Not yet. Why is it not? Needs to equal 0, so I've got to subtract 16 from both sides. And so I get x squared plus y squared minus 4x plus 6y minus 3 equals 0. Now we have it in general form. Okay? When you are doing problems on the ACT and the SAT, one of the things that they want you to be able to do is be able to recognize shapes of the conic sections very quickly from their equations that are in general form. So what I want you to notice here is that the coefficient of x and y are the same number, 1 in this case, and they're both positive. It cannot be a circle if they don't have the exact same number in front of the x squared and the y squared term. Everybody hear what I just said? That's how you tell if something in general form is a circle, is if the coefficient, there is an x squared and a y squared, and they both have the same number sitting in front of them with the same sign. Okay? Then last thing that we have in this section, the last objective, is that sometimes they're going to give us these things. I'm going to use checkpoint 6. They're going to give us these equations in general form, and guess what they're going to want us to do? Put it in standard form so that we can do what to it? So we can graph it, right? Okay? So, what we have to do here, no, you can't put that in the calculator. There's not. Well, there is a magical process called completing the square that we have to use. Okay, we talked about how to complete the square last year, but we just did it with quadratic equations. And it really isn't even necessary with quadratic equations. But to be able to go from general form to standard form, you have to complete the square. There is no other way to do this. Okay? There's no magic. There's no shortcut. This is it. When you Google it, it's going to give you the same process. Okay? This is how you do this. What you do is you separate the x's and the y's from each other, and you put all of the number on the far side of the equation. So I'm going to rewrite this, and I'm going to make this x squared plus 4x. I'm going to kind of leave a spot right here because we're going to need it in a minute. And then plus y squared minus 4y. Then do the same thing with the little space, is equal to positive 1. Everybody see what I did? I just kind of resorted stuff. Put the x's together, the y's together, and I took the number and put it on the other side. Okay? Now, what we're going to do is that process that I've been doing, instead of like multiplying it out, you know, I kind of got it in my head that I do the first squared and the last one squared and the first times the second times 2, right? I'm going to use that idea because I need to know what number needs to be put in this little slot right here for me to be able to do that. Now think about it just for a minute. If this were x plus some number squared, I'd do x squared and get that one, right? To get this one, I would have done the first times the second times 2. Yeah, everybody hear what I just said? That's what I've been doing. So what number needs to be here to be able to get a 4x? 2. Now this is how you do that without having to think that hard. You always just take whatever number's in front of the x and divide it by 2. And that's going to give you this number that's going to go inside the parentheses. Now, what do I need to actually add, though? I got to have this number squared, right? So I need to add 4. Everybody understand? Okay, so what you do is you take the number, whatever's in front of the x or the y, divide it by 2, and then take that number and square it. When you squared it, that gave you the number to add in the original equation, and what you got to begin with gives you the number that's going to go in that parenthesis. Okay? Just got to remember where they go. That's the hardest part on this process. Now this one, remember I'm going to need y. It'll need to be minus, right? Because I got a minus sign here. So what number would I do this times 2 to get this 4? Another 2, right? And again, the way you do that is you take the negative 4 and divide it by 2, and that'll give you negative 2. That helps you remember about the minus or the plus. You don't have to remember. It'll just give it to you. That's going to be squared. But this is not the number I need to put up here. The number I need to put up there is whatever negative 2 squared is, which is positive 4. Now, here's the trick. This only works if I keep the sides of my equation equal, right? So I added 4 on this side and 4 on this side, so I need to add what? over here? 8, actually, right? So I got 2 4s, so I actually need to add an 8 to keep that equivalent, so that this side's going to become 9. Done. It's in standard form now. Okay? It's really not hard, but you do have to remember that little idea of that shortcut that I use all the time, where I do the first one squared, first times the second, always times 2, because there's 2 of them, right? And then the last one squared. And you got to make these 2 be equivalent by adding in whatever number you need for that to work. That's why I take all the number to the other side, and I just let that add together as I go. It's so much easier. I know some people who try to, like, use that number in one of these, and it's just, that becomes too complicated. Okay? There is no catch. This is it. This is the hard part. Okay? The homework I gave you last time, do you need me to write it down again? Okay. All right. Get busy.